Hello, everybody. I think we're going to get started. I wanted to wait a few minutes because only about half of the people who registered are actually here, but I've given them a few minutes to show up, so this might be all that arrive. So I just want to, first I want to walk through how this webinar will work. I'm going to walk through how to use the audit log in Outcome Tracker. And anytime during the webinar, you're muted, but anytime during the webinar, if you have questions, you can, on the GoToWebinar panel, there's a questions section. You can ask a question in there. Or if you raise your hand, you can raise your hand and I will see that and I will come to you and you can ask your question. So if you have any questions, then you can use that. I'll also stop at times and ask if there are any questions and wait a moment for someone to ask a question. And if there are no questions, then I'll move on. But you are muted, so if you speak, I will not hear you. So you have to make sure you raise your hand or type your question out in the questions thing, and then I will be able to address your questions. So let's go ahead and get started. The audit log, let's talk about what the audit log, this is Christoph, by the way, from ACWS, in case you didn't know. So let's talk about what the audit log is. Every time you take an action in Outcome Tracker, a record is created of that. So anytime you make a change or view a report or export a query, or it doesn't actually have to be a change that you've made. View a tab. Anytime you do almost anything in Outcome Tracker, a record is kept of that, created and kept of that action. The audit log is that record. So you can create. You can look at the things that that have been done in your database with the audit log. Now, there are basically two different kinds of audit logs. There are audit logs for clients and audit logs for staff. And basically what that means is that there are audit logs where the audit log is a record of everything that has been done to a client's file. And then there are audit logs that is a record of everything that a staff member has done. The same information, slightly different approaches to how you view that information. Those are sort of two different sorts. Well, they're the same audit log. They're just two different sorts of ways that you can organize the information in an audit log that I find useful. So we're going to walk through how to create an audit log for a client to look at the changes that have been done to a client's file, how to create an audit log that will look at the changes that a particular staff member has done, and these are different. There are different ways you do that. And then we will look at some of the things that you will probably see on an audit log and what they mean, because the audit log itself is not terribly transparent. There's a little bit of decoding that you have to do to make sense of the audit log sometimes. And then we can briefly talk about what the applications for the audit log that you might find useful. So that's sort of my agenda for today. Also, there's a handout for this webinar, and anything I discuss in the webinar is on this handout. So you can, I'm not going to be going in exactly the same order as the handout, because I think in the webinar it makes more sense to talk about creating an audit log for clients first, and then talking about staff, and then the handout I go the other way. But everything I talk about is in the handout, if not in the same order. And that's available for you in the handout section. So let's get started, I think. Hopefully you can see my screen now. I'm just logged into Outcome Tracker. So now we know what an audit log is, basically. It is a record of the changes and actions that have been made in your database. As I said earlier, there are basically two really useful ways to look at an audit log. One is by client and one is by staff. I'm going to first walk you through how to set up a audit log so that you can look at changes that have been made in a client's file. But before I do that, let's take a pause and let me ask if there are any questions so far about basically what an audit log is and its usefulness. And then I'll pause for a minute if anybody has any questions before we move on. If you have a question, you can just type it in the questions box or raise your hand. Okay, doesn't seem like there are any questions, so let's move on. So the audit log, if you want to see what changes have been made in a client's file, for instance, you might want to do this if you were sure that you put an admission date in a client's file for a certain day, but they're not showing up in the report, and you look at the client's file and you see that the admission date has been changed. A audit log could help you figure out who made that change, and maybe you could have a discussion with them about why that was. And setting up an audit log for a client is quite easy because it's just a tab and it's already a sort of pre-configured tab. You just have to enable it to show up for people. So in order to do that, you would need to have admin privileges. So if you don't have admin privileges, then this probably isn't going to be terribly helpful for you. But if you do, then you can go to Setup once you log in. And under People Organization here, you'll see there's the Define Tabs. That's what we want. And at the bottom of this list, you'll see there's already an Audit Log tab, but we're going to just set up another one just so I can show you how to do it. At the bottom of this list, you want Add. I'm going to put in tab location, we can keep at the default. Color, we can keep at the default. And if you want to change those, well, you probably don't want to change tab location. Color, you can change if you want. But the component is what we really want to make sure we change from activities to audit log. I'd say probably 75% of the tabs in your site are probably form. And you're probably, if you have experience setting up tabs, it's with form tabs. This is an audit log tab. The component is audit log, and we want to add that. And I happen to have 2 pages of tabs, but you probably only have 1. But the most recent one you added will be at the bottom of the list. And here we see audit log 2, and its component is audit log. And now, if you've ever set up a tab, this will be familiar for you. You can select what roles you want this to show up for. If you want it to show up for certain roles and not others, I find with a tab like this, you probably want it to show everywhere. Maybe not. That is a decision that you can make. If not, you can just choose the particular roles that you want. Update, and then let's take a look at one of the audit log. You can tell this information is not actual client data. So here, audit 2, there's no difference between the two, but You can see a record of the changes that have been made, or these actually aren't changes, they're just tabs that have been viewed in this client's file. So anything related to this client's file will be here. Let's say if I go to residential intake, and let's say I fill this out real quick. Emergency, I have to make sure I get all the provincially required fields. I'm not paying attention to what I'm inputting. I'm just putting stuff in so I can save it. You're familiar with all these provincially required fields. Let's see. And type of experience, type of abuse, and enrollment link is blank. Okay, let's see. Save that. And it's saved. Let's return to the audit log, and we'll see that an enrollment was created for the admission intake form. And all of the things that I filled out will appear here too. Type of abuse experienced, reporting requirement, was client born in Canada, so on and so forth. So anything that I didn't fill out in the activity did not show up here because it's sort of considered irrelevant information if I just left it blank. If I go back to the residential intake, and let's say I want to change this from emergency to second stage, which probably would never actually happen in your shelter unless it was by mistake that somebody put that in there. Then we'll see, if I go back to the audit log, we'll see that the enrollment type of program has been changed from residential, emergency residential, second stage residential. One thing I will say is that normally in a regular client's file, there can be hundreds of these, because as you see it, like every little thing you do, it keeps a record of it. So there could be hundreds of these. One thing that I find useful is this right here, denotes that a change has been made. And so when I'm trying to find edits, which if you're looking at an audit log for a client's file, you're probably trying to find the edits that have been made. So if I'm trying to find edits, what I find useful is to take this, copy it, Control C, and then if I go Control F, I think it's the same for all browsers, Control F, find something in your site and just paste that. It highlights the changes that have been made. So I can see that these changes have been made. And that's really useful to help find edits that have been made if you're trying to find who made a particular edit. I can see my user account, my username login is OT support, but if you, if one of your staff members made their change, then this will be their name, so you'll see who made that change. So are there any questions? Let's pause for a second. And if you have a question, you can write it in the questions box or raise your hand and we can discuss. I do want to talk about some of the things that you will see in a typical audit log, but I think I'm going to wait until after we talk about creating an audit log for staff members, so that you can see what a particular staff member is doing in your database. And then we can talk about the kinds of things that you'll typically see on audit log and what they mean, just so we sort of have these under our belts, and then we can talk about some of the things and what they mean. So if there are no questions, then I'm going to move on. So that's how you create an audit log to look at a particular client's file and the changes that have been made in this client's file. If if you want to look and see what a particular staff member has done in your database, then you can create a audit log query. So if you're familiar with creating queries, this will be a little bit easier, although the audit log query is a little bit different than most queries that you will make in Outcome Tracker. So I'm just going to go to my personal folder here. And so I just went to Reports personal folder, and probably if and when you create an audit log query, you'll want to keep it in your personal folder, at least until you know for certain that it's pulling the information that you want. This can be somewhat sensitive information, so you probably don't want to put it someplace where everybody can see it in your database, but let's go ahead and look at how to create a query. Like I said, if you have experience creating queries in Outcome Tracker, this will be a little bit easier, but there are some key differences that you need to keep in mind. And all this is also in the handout, which is in the handout section. So if you have any questions, you can also look at that. And let's go to add new query as you normally would to create a new query. Let's call this audit log for webinar. And then I'll leave the description blank. Maybe I'll put in to pull audit log by staff name, just to be clear. Let's go next. So by default, when you create a query, you have these columns selected to be included by default. And normally that would be a good thing. You almost always want these columns to be in your query. However, with the audit log, this is not the case. The audit log is its own special kind of query, and if you keep these fields here on the right, full name and system ID, if you keep these fields in this query, the query will not work. In Outcome Tracker, different kinds of questions for different kinds of queries don't work well in the same query together with other types. So mixing these types of questions in with the audit log questions is not going to be good. It won't work. So what we want is only the audit log questions, which in the group on the far left here is under miscellaneous. And then it's the first one, audit log. So we just want to select all of these and move them over. And make sure that they're the only ones in the selected columns. If there's any default ones in here, then you don't want that. I also have a habit, it's very strong, whenever I create a query, to go to enrollments, all enrollments, details, and add enrollment activity description and enrollment begin date, because you also almost always want those, but in this instance you don't. So if your habit, like me, is to go immediately to this and add those fields, don't do that. You want only audit log fields, which are again in miscellaneous audit log. And then let's click next. Normally when you create a query, it sorts by first name. Sorry, it sorts by full name, which is one of the fields that we removed by default, in ascending, which is good. Most of the time that works just fine. In this case, it's probably not the most helpful to sort by audit log action. Sorting a query, since you typically don't have to worry about sorting a query, I'll explain real quick. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is how the query will be sorted when you create it. So any data that is pulled, this is how and what order it will display. So I think it is probably most useful to, in this case, to sort by timestamp, probably timestamp descending. which means that when the information is pulled together, it will display with the most recent timestamps at the top and the least recent at the bottom. So let's do that. Let's click next. So we probably want to have a filter on audit log user equals, let's do a prompt, and then present as a drop down. Let's change this from audit log user probably to something more useful like staff name. And then let's click next. And honestly, that's probably the only filter that you will definitely need. Let me see what other filters I suggest. Oh yeah, I'm being silly. I just realized. You probably also want a date prompt. So normally when you do date prompts in Outcome Tracker, you're either going to do them on enrollment begin date or on admission date. In this case, you would do audit log timestamp. But outside of that, it's exactly like it normally would be for a date prompt in Outcome Tracker. Let's just begin date. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining this because I'm assuming that some of you have a decent level of experience creating queries. Let's make this first day of last month. And again, this time less than or equal to, let's make this the end date. And let's make this the last day of last month. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to email me at otsupport@acws.ca, and I can walk you through. This is pretty basic query building things. So yeah, if you have any questions, just drop me a line and we can walk through it together. Let's click next. So basically, what we're telling this query is that we want any results from the audit log user that we put in the prompt between the dates that we put in the prompt. Let's click finish. I'm going to change this to parent agency only. You don't have to worry about that. I'm just telling it that I only want results from the ACWS site. Let's go to results. Oh, I'm going to rearrange these prompts. So this is kind of useful information even outside of the query, of the audit log query. If you ever find that your prompts are in a somewhat nonsensical order, because I actually added this one before I added the date ones, you can just go to Reorder Prompts. If you go to Filter, Reorder Prompts, and then I'm just going to move this down so that the staff name is after the dates. And then I'm going to go to Results. And I'm going to put in, let's put in OT support, that's me. And then I see everything that I've done in the last month. So this is, as you can tell, it's quite a bit more substantial than the, oh, this was for the month of December. Anyway, it's quite a bit more substantial than it was when we looked at the client's file. This is typical of what you will see. And these are, yeah, that's how you would create a audit log if you want to look at a particular staff's action in the database. So I'll take a break here and ask if there are any questions. If you have questions, you can raise your hand or type it out in the questions section. And then we're going to go over what these fields mean now that we know how to create the audit log. We'll go over what these fields mean and some of the things that you'll see in them, and then yeah. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and type them out. Okay, we have a question. Are there handouts with this information? Yes, in the handouts section of the webinar, there is a PDF that has all this information in it. So if you want to refer to that, you can do that. And also, this webinar is being recorded, and I will put it up on YouTube shortly after this webinar, probably tomorrow, and send it out to the OT administrators. And then I can also put the handout on that with the link to the webinar, with the link to the YouTube video that is this webinar. And I can also put the handout with that email too. So the handout is there for you if you need it, but I'll also probably put it in the email. All right. If there are no more questions, then let's talk about what these fields mean. So you'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fields in the audit log. In my opinion, the audit log location is not useful at all. I often don't even add it when I create an audit log. But it is something that you can put on there. A lot of the times it doesn't make sense. Like, what does this even mean? I don't know. And most of the times it's just like outcome tracker dot people or /form or index HTML. It doesn't really mean anything. I don't find it terribly useful, but all the other ones can be quite useful. So let's walk through what these mean. The audit log action is the change or action that had taken place. So for instance, at this time, the goal attainment tab was viewed. I viewed a few times in a row on this day. You can tell by me. Goal attainment tab was viewed. Danger assessment, goal attainment. The intake was viewed. Seems like I did a lot of viewing of tabs in this client's file around the 13th and 14th of December for some reason. And then we can see that the audit log detail is where if there were changes that were made, if there were edits that were made, or if I enrolled this person in an activity, this is where that information would be displayed. So I can see that on the 14th of December, I made a change to this person's file. I updated it, enrollment updated on the form from form on tab. So basically what that means is that this person was already enrolled because there's enrollment updated and enrollment created that can possibly show up in this in the audit log. So this enrollment updated means that this person was already updated, and I just went in to their tab and changed the information. So so some of the things I changed, I can see it seems like this enrollment already existed and it was blank, and I just put information in it. So this, yeah, so I can see that this is a goal attainment. I viewed the goal attainment and then I updated it. So that that is what that means. So those were all the changes that I made. And let's see, here we go. I can see that I changed the begin date of one of this activity. Oh, wait, why? Oh, never mind. We don't, that is something else. Never mind. Okay, so Audit Log Detail is the record of the changes that have been made. Audit Log Location, as I said, is not terribly useful. Audit Log Name is the name of the client's file that the changes have been made in. So in this case, I made most of these changes or viewed these tabs in Redbird's file, which is a fake client's file, not a real person. And this is their system name ID. Audit log timestamp is what this is filtered on. And so you'll see that there's nothing before December 1st or after December 31st. In fact, they stop at December 19th because after that I went on Christmas break. But you'll see the timestamp there. And because we sorted it in descending order, the most recent is at the top and the least recent is at the bottom. You'll see that they get smaller as you go down. And Audit Log User is what this is filtered on. So you'll only get results for OT support, but those are what, but that's where that would be if it were somebody else. So that's more useful when you're looking at a client's file audit log, because that will display any changes that were made to that client's file, no matter who did it. So if you wanted to know who did it, you would look at that. So that is what some of the fields are in outcome tracker. Okay. So in the handout, I have the audit log action. I have a list of some of the things that you'll see in the audit log action field. These are the most common ones, but there are some other ones that are there that you might run into. Typically, they're not always totally transparent what they mean, but usually you can understand, once you understand how the audit log works, you can understand what the action means. But here are some of the most popular, most often used ones. So query exported, sometimes you'll see in the audit log action here, audit log detail query exported. That means that a query was exported from to Excel, which happens a lot for the members because of the reporting that needs to get done monthly. So anytime you export your reports, it'll say that in the audit log. Enrollment updated from form on tab, we saw that earlier. It means that an already existing enrollment was updated. Enrollment created, which means that the client was enrolled in an activity on a form on a tab. A certain tab was viewed. We saw that in the audit log that we created. Certain names, the names of certain tabs that were viewed in the client's file. One we didn't see that was probably useful to know is you'll see when roles are added or updated in the client's file. So if you wanted to know when a person, because you can change the begin and end dates of a role to whatever you want. So the begin date of the role is not necessarily the day they were given that role. So if you want to know exactly when and by whom a client was given a particular role, you can see that in the audit log. That is the audit log. I'm just making sure that I hit all the points that I wanted to hit. So we talked about what the audit log is. We talked about some of the definitions, the fields, how to do an audit log by staff member, which is like creating an audit log query, how to add the audit log tab, which is how you look at the audit log results by a particular client file. So that's pretty much the audit log in a nutshell. Are there any questions? I'll stop and wait for any questions that might come up. Okay, doesn't seem like there are any questions. So we can talk for a moment about how this might be useful for you in your database. If you want to, you can use it to manage your staff. And for instance, if there are mistakes that continually happen in your database, you can look at the audit log, see who are making those mistakes, and provide targeted training or targeted information to your staff about the correct processes in your database. So that would be really useful. You could also see when particular things have happened for when edits were made for particular clients' files, which could be useful in knowing when a client's file was started, because the dates that you put into really any activity aren't necessarily the day that they're being filled out. So admission intake, the admission date is not necessarily the date that it was filled out, although there is the intake date, which is meant to be that date. But sometimes, not even that will be the day that the form was actually filled out. If you want to know who filled out particular forms, which isn't always clear, because you can put, if your staff wanted to, they could put somebody else. They might accidentally put somebody else's name in. If you want to know who actually filled out the form, you can do that on the client's file audit log, and exactly when that happened, that's the client's file audit log, or any change that's made. So it's quite useful to manage what's been happening and figuring out what's happening in your database and who has done particular things. So the usefulness is pretty clear. So yeah, so that is the audit log. So I think that's it. I'm just going to stop one more time and ask if there are any questions. And if there are no questions, then we can wrap up. And there will be a short survey after the webinar. Once I end the webinar, a short little survey about how the webinar was. If you could fill that out, that would really help. And after this webinar, which is being recorded, I will upload the video onto YouTube and make it available to Outcome Tracker administrators and, well, any member who wants to watch it. And you'll get an email with that link and this handout soon. So, are there any questions? All right, it doesn't seem like there are any questions. So hopefully that means that I was very clear and you understand the audit log and Outcome Tracker really well. And of course, if you have any questions about the audit log or anything like that, you can email me at otsupport@acws.ca and I will get back to you. Oh, we do have a question. Oh, it was not a question. It was a thanks, and you're welcome. Yeah, so like I said, if you do have any questions, just email me and I will get back to you. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks for coming.